In this video, I'm going to share you 3 insights for better health using the principles learned in BJ Fogg's great book, Tiny Habits. I'm going to introduce the first in a series of book summaries that I found useful in optimizing health. Now, there is a well-known statistic stating that 95% of people regain the weight they've lost within 3 years. Every year, in January, people start health drives only to stop midway through the month and regain the old ingrained behaviours. Many state that this is just down to laziness, or even worse, no willpower. I'll do a video in the future of why this is a load of BS. These reasons are too simplistic and fail to point the flash of attention on the main factor that leads to ongoing long-term change. That factor is simple. Have you create a habit or system of habits that will maintain your new way of being? If not, your old behaviours will return, guaranteed. This is what makes BJ Fogg's book so great. It systematically breaks down what a habit is and what has to be present in order for a habit to stick. Now, make no mistake, whatever you do to implement in your life, whether it's health, work or relationship related, for the behaviour or the way of thinking has to become a habit in order for it to become a long-term change in your life. Now, BJ Fogg has been in the habit game for decades. As a social scientist at Stanford University, he created the Behaviour Design Lab. He initially led the work into how companies can be persuasive online and create online habitual behaviour. Some of his notable former students include co-founder of Instagram, Mike Krieger, author of I Will Teach You to Be Rich, Ram Sethi, and one of the co-founders of the new social site Clubhouse was also a student. In short, BJ Fogg knows how to make change stick. And what better way to get an insight into how to increase your health and fitness than to take some of the principles from his book, Tiny Habits. In this video, I will share some of the main principles that I have incorporated in helping my clients. Number 1, Fogg talks about there being 3 things we can do to create lasting change. Have an epiphany, change your environment, or change your habit in tiny ways. The issue for a lot of problems we face, especially in health, is we get stuck in recurring patterns that inhibit having an insight. We get caught up in work, we go to the same social events weekly that all involve alcohol or food, or sometimes we feel bad or bored, we eat. These recurring patterns force a tunnel-like vision that when thinking about change makes it appear impossible at times. But by having an epiphany, changing your environment, or changing the behaviour in a tiny way, you begin altering the system. Like a railway system, if the instruction is given to change the track of the train link next to it, the train goes into a completely new direction. The whole railway line stays the same, but for that particular track changes, and so the train goes in a new direction. I experienced this with a client who, after getting close to 18 stone, had to have a knee and hip replacement. This became his epiphany. No way could this continue. So when he came to me, we started slow on 1 session a week and had him track his calories. This made sure his change in behaviour was tiny enough for his to keep consistent. 18 months later, he has lost 5 stone, and despite the boredom of lockdown, he has managed to maintain his weight loss. Number 2 is the anatomy of the habit. Now, this is quite similar to how the author Charles Duhigg describes the power of habits. The way BJ Fogg dissects habits is by having 3 parts: the anchor moment, the tiny behaviour, and the instant celebration. One great tip from Fogg is to piggyback the behaviour of an already established habit. So you can go to the gym on your way home from work, or you can eat a piece of fruit every time you have a cup of tea or coffee. Even better, how many squats could you do in a day if you piggybacked doing 10 squats every time you made a tea or coffee? Duhigg dissects habits as cue, routine, reward. The instant celebration is something that Fogg goes into some detail on because he feels it is a common mistake when discussing habits. On most explanations of habits, the instant celebration is usually labelled reward, as shown with Charles Duhigg's description. Fogg sees the common mistake being the reward happening too long after the behaviour, making the effectiveness of the reward not associate with the behaviour. Now, in order for a habit to stick, the brain must validate the experience in order to warrant it being repeated. This means the behaviour has to be rewarded in some way, and the sooner the reward comes after the behaviour, the stronger that validation will be. This is why Fogg emphasises the instant celebration afterwards. So let's say you're going to reward yourself with a massage every time you train 3 days a week. Whilst a massage will be very pleasing, it will be too far removed from the act of working out for it to be associated with exercise, and as a result, unlikely to form part of a habit. Yet, the frequently told story about Jerry Seinfeld is a perfect example of instant celebration. When asked how he stays consistent with his writing, Seinfeld replies he doesn't want to break the chain. What he means by this is that every time he finishes writing, he marks an X on the calendar for that day. Across each day forms a chain, and the thought of breaking that chain prompts him to write, even if it's just a sentence. And so crossing off on the calendar acts as an instant celebration. So when you are increasing your health in any way, whether that be doing some stress reduction technique or creating an exercise plan or eating in a slightly different way, think about what cue will let me know to start, what specifically is the behaviour you are doing, and what could you do less than 30 seconds after the behaviour that will act as an instant celebration. Number 3, when looking at behaviours that will form a health habit, exercising, eating in a healthy way, keeping your stress level low, etc., all behaviours will be initiated if it fulfills 3 objectives of what Fogg calls MAP. Motivation, you have to have the desire to do the behaviour. Ability, you have to know how to do the behaviour. And prompt, you have to have a cue to do the behaviour. If you are struggling to maintain a behaviour, ask yourself whether you have the motivation, the ability, or you have a prompt to initiate the behaviour. Fogg points out motivation is the last step in the troubleshooting order. Many assume motivation is always the thing missing if you are not doing something, when in actual fact, it is usually the other 2. Your ability to carry out the behaviour of the size you are thinking about, or the lack of prompt for you to do it. When a new client comes to me, I ask about their past experiences of getting healthier. Without fail, their rationale for not being where they want to be is motivational. Yet, as Fogg shows, for a large part, they rarely ask themselves whether they know exactly what to do, or more often than not, what they set out to do is usually shoehorned into a spare moment in the day, so little to no prompt. So let me ask you a question. Say you wanted to increase your fitness in 30 days. What would you do? Let's say the answer you come to is go to the gym. Now ask yourself, what specifically would you do in the gym? And do you know how to do it? It's no problem if you don't. These questions prompt you to get answers. But if you have a workout that involves deadlifts and you only realize you don't know how to deadlift properly when you are in the gym staring at that barbell, you are very likely to falter. So let's say you now know what you want to do and you know how to do it. What is going to be your prompt? Think about work. A meeting never starts spontaneously. It is always scheduled in the diary. So that's your prompt. So what would be your prompt for starting your behaviour? Mapping it out like this saves a shed load of time and a shed load of disappointment in the future, and it's very easy to get started. Number 4. Fogg says in his book there are 3 ways to make a behaviour easier to do. They are increase your skill, gather resources, and make the behaviour tiny. Anytime you get better at a skill, it becomes easier over time. Once you know exercise like the back of your hand, you become more inclined to do it. When cooking becomes a simple task, less thinking is needed. Equally, with an increasing amount of resources, things become easier. Resources can also include creating support groups or a training buddy who shares the same outcome. A seemingly hard task becomes a little easier. And just like the writing block example I used in the previous video, when the task becomes just writing one sentence, it is a lot easier to start than expecting to write a whole chapter. So one of the things I do on my health protocol online training is the first 12 weeks, when weight loss is the main focus, I focus the exercise portion on just movement, very little intensity. The reason is this: in the initial weight loss phase, exercise intensity is less important, but by focusing on movement, it sets you up for developing more intensity later with less chance of injury or being turned off early by killing yourself in the exercise. My health protocol fulfills all of those three objectives. I make it skill-based, I provide the support so you have increasing resources, and I make the behaviours small enough for you to cope and fit in with your current lifestyle. So if you want more information on becoming part of the health protocol, be sure to find the link in the description box below. So to conclude, change can be instant, but to ingrain it in your life, you must create habits. BJ Fogg's book highlights exactly in a systematic way how to create habits in any endeavour, and increasing your health and fitness is no different. For more great content like this, I'd love it if you could subscribe to this channel and like this video. It helps with my algorithm and getting it in front of more people like yourself. And I'd like to hear any of your questions below and whether you've read BJ Fogg's book, Tiny Habits. Until next time, see you in the next video.